I straightened my tie in the rearview mirror, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment longer than I needed to. The parking lot of my parents' house was already full. My uncle's truck, my aunt's minivan with the cracked bumper she never got fixed, my brother-in-law's leased Audi, because of course he leased it. I knew what was waiting inside. I just didn't know yet that tonight would be the last time I ever walked through that front door and felt anything close to belonging. Let me back up. I'm 31. I work in commercial real estate. Not the glamorous kind you see on TV, not flipping mansions or doing deals over martinis. I spend my days reviewing zoning codes, negotiating lease renewals for small business owners, driving out to strip malls in the suburbs to walk properties nobody else wants to bother with. I started as an assistant at 22, got my license at 24, and by 28 I had saved enough to put a down payment on a condo in a mid-rise near downtown. Nothing extravagant. 2 bedrooms, a small balcony, a parking spot that's technically mine but always has someone else's car in it. I bought it myself. No cosigner, no family loan, no help from anyone. I want to say that clearly because it becomes important later. My sister married her husband 3 years ago. I'll be honest, I never loved the guy, not because he was mean or cruel or anything dramatic like that, more because he had a particular way of walking into rooms like he was already calculating what he could get out of them. My sister met him at a work conference, and within 8 months, they were engaged. My parents adored him immediately, which should have been a sign. My parents have always been drawn to people who project confidence and push the costs onto someone else. The wedding was fine. I was a groomsman. I smiled in all the photos. I gave a toast that people said was funny, and I meant every word of it because despite everything, I do love my sister. She's not a bad person. She's just someone who has spent her entire life watching my parents solve problems by pointing at me. After the wedding, they moved into my brother-in-law's apartment, a rental, 1 bedroom, in a neighborhood that was fine but not what he had apparently promised her before they got married. That was the first crack. Within a year, they were talking about needing more space. Within 2 years, my sister started mentioning, casually at first and then less casually, that it would be really nice to have a place with a yard, or at least a 2nd bedroom, or at minimum, a building with an elevator, because her back hurt going up 3 flights. I heard all of this secondhand, through my mother mostly, who had a talent for delivering information in a way that sounded like idle conversation, but was actually a slow-building argument. Your sister's been having a hard time, she'd say. Or, it must be tough living somewhere that small. Or, my personal favorite, you have so much space in that condo of yours. I never took the bait. I'd nod, change the subject, help clear the table. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself my mother wasn't actually implying what she seemed to be implying, because no one would actually suggest what I was starting to think she was suggesting. I was wrong about that. The dinner tonight, the one I was still sitting in the parking lot preparing for, had been billed as a birthday celebration for my dad, 62 years old. My mom had made his favorite lasagna, or so she said in the text she sent the week before. Just family, nothing big. Please come, it would mean so much to your father. I brought a bottle of wine he likes and a card I spent too long picking out. I was trying. I am always trying. My aunt let me in. The house smelled like garlic bread and candles and the particular brand of carpet cleaner my mother has used my entire life. My dad was in his recliner watching a game recap. He looked up when I came in, nodded, said hey bud, and looked back at the screen. That was the most we'd spoken in months. Dinner was normal-ish. My brother-in-law talked about a new project at his job. Something in logistics. I've never fully understood what he does. And my mother kept refilling everyone's water glasses and asking if anyone wanted more bread. My aunt told a long story about a neighbor dispute that I had heard twice before, but let her finish anyway. My sister laughed at all the right moments. My dad ate quietly. I should have noticed how quiet he was. My dad is a talker at dinners, usually. He likes to hold court. The fact that he was quiet should have registered. Dessert came. My mom brought out a cake, everyone sang. My dad blew out the candles. And then, when the plates were being cleared, and I was starting to calculate how soon I could reasonably leave, my mother sat down at the head of the table, folded her hands, and said she wanted to share something exciting. She said it the way people announce pregnancies or promotion. What she actually announced was that she and my father had decided to give my condo to my sister and her husband. I sat very still. She kept talking. She said that since my sister and brother-in-law had been struggling with their living situation, and since I had enough income to afford something else, and since it would keep the property in the family, They had all agreed. And here she swept her hand around the table, like this was already a settled matter, that I would transfer the condo to my sister, and they would help me find something to rent in the meantime. Something to rent. I had a mortgage. I had owned that property for 3 years. I had put 40-something thousand dollars down on it, and another $2,000 a month into the principal. And not a single person at that table had contributed so much as $1 toward any of it. And my mother was sitting there, hands folded, cake crumbs on the tablecloth, announcing that they had decided I would give it away. I said, "That's not going to happen," very calm. I surprised myself, actually. My mother blinked. She had the expression of someone who had rehearsed a scene and the other actor just skipped 10 pages of script. "I think you should think about it before you react," she said. "I'm not reacting," I said. "I'm telling you. The condo is mine. My name is on the deed. I have a mortgage in my name. There's nothing to think about." My brother-in-law leaned back in his chair and studied the ceiling, which was his way of pretending to be above the situation, while still being very much in it. My sister looked at the table. My dad said nothing. My aunt quietly picked up her fork and started on a second slice of cake. My mother said, "We're your family. She's your sister." "I know who she is," I said. "She needs this more than you do." I looked at my sister when my mother said that. I wanted to see if she would say anything. She didn't. She pressed her lips together and kept looking at the tablecloth. And I understood then that she had known about this. She had known before I walked in. Possibly she had been part of planning it. I don't know if that made it worse or if I had just been slow to understand what kind of dinner this actually was. "I'm going to say this once," I said, and I kept my voice level, which cost me more than it probably looked like it did. "The condo is not available. It's not a gift I'm withholding. It's my home that I bought with money I earned, and no one at this table has any claim to it. If my sister and her husband need a bigger place, that's a real problem, and I hope they solve it. But it's not mine to solve for them." My mother stood up. I don't know if she planned to or if it just happened. She stood up and she said, and I'm going to quote this exactly because I've replayed it many times, "You have always been selfish, since you were a little boy, always so concerned with what was yours." And then she grabbed the sleeve of my jacket. Not a slap, but a grab, the kind you do when you're about to physically move someone, or when you want them to feel your authority in your hand. She grabbed my sleeve and she said, "You owe this family." I stood up. I pulled my arm back, not hard, just enough to break the grip. I looked at my dad. He was looking at the table now too. The game recap was still playing in the other room. I picked up my jacket from the back of my chair. I said, "Happy birthday, Dad." He didn't respond. I walked out. I sat in my car for about 20 minutes. Not because I was emotional. I mean, I was, but that's not why I sat there. I sat there because I was running through every scenario, very calmly, and figuring out what happened next. Here is what I knew. My mother had announced, in front of witnesses, that my condo was being given to my sister. My brother-in-law had been there and had said nothing to contradict it, which meant there was at least a possibility, not a high one, but a possibility, that someone might try to act on that announcement in a way that created legal confusion. File something, contest something. I didn't know exactly what they might try. I just knew that I had spent 3 years building something, and the people sitting at that table had just made it very clear they felt entitled to it. I called my real estate attorney that night. I know that sounds dramatic, but she's someone I work with professionally, and I trusted her. I explained what had happened. She said to send her the deed documents first thing in the morning, and that we would make sure everything was airtight. She also said, gently, that I might want to consider refinancing under an LLC or a trust structure at some point, just to add a layer between my personal name and the property. I said I'd think about it. I also called my bank and added a fraud alert on anything tied to my home address. Again, probably overly cautious, but I had just watched my mother announce the transfer of my property to a room full of people without so much as asking me, and overly cautious felt like the right setting. The texts started the next morning. My mother, a long one about how hurt she was that I had left without talking it through. No acknowledgement that she had announced the transfer of my home without my knowledge or consent. Just hurt. Just, "I can't believe you walked out on your father's birthday." My sister, shorter, but more pointed, "I didn't think you'd actually just leave," as though leaving had been the problem. My brother-in-law, nothing, which was in its own way an answer. My aunt, my dad's sister, the one who had been at the dinner, texted me 2 days later. She said she wanted me to know she thought the whole thing was completely inappropriate and that she had told my mother so afterward. That text meant more to me than I expected it to. My dad called once, about a week after. It was a short call. He said he hoped I wasn't holding a grudge. He said my mother meant well. He said family was complicated. I said I understood. I said I wasn't holding a grudge. I said I just needed some time. That was technically true. I wasn't holding a grudge. Grudges require hoping things will get better. I had already started building the map of the distance I was going to put between us. The thing about growing up in a family like mine, and I want to be precise here, because I don't think my family is uniquely terrible, I think they're a specific kind of ordinary, is that the dynamic doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. My sister was the one who needed help. From the time we were kids, she was the one who needed the tutoring and the second chances and the extensions. I was the one who figured things out. So figuring things out became my assignment. It became so baked in that by the time we were adults, I don't think my parents even registered it as an expectation anymore. It was just the natural order of things. I would have resources, and those resources would flow toward my sister, because that's how it had always worked. What they didn't account for was that I had spent 31 years watching that dynamic, and at some point I had started making very deliberate choices in response to it. I bought the condo alone. I didn't mention it until the deal was closed. I handled my finances privately, not out of secrecy, but because I had learned that anything I mentioned became subject to input I hadn't asked for. None of that was visible to them. They saw a son who had done well, and assumed that doing well meant having surplus, and assumed that surplus was family property. It's not a malicious worldview, exactly, it's just completely wrong. 3 weeks after the dinner, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up. It was my brother-in-law. He said he wanted to talk without things getting heated. He said he hoped I knew that he had never intended for the conversation to go the way it did. He said he was sorry I felt blindsided. I let him finish. Then I asked him directly, "Did you know my mother was going to say that at dinner?" He was quiet for a moment. "We had talked," he said. "And you thought that was appropriate?" "I thought it was going to be more of a conversation," he said. "It wasn't a conversation," I said. "She announced it as a fait accompli in front of my aunt and my father." He said he understood that it had come across that way. I said I didn't think it had come across any particular way. I said I thought that was what it was. He said, "We really do need more space." I believed him. I actually believe that part is completely true. They probably do need more space. That's a real problem. But it is not my problem to fix, and more specifically, it is not a problem I should be expected to fix by surrendering an asset I spent years building. I said, "I hope you find something." He said, "I hope we can move past this." I said, "Take care of yourself." I hung up. My sister called 2 days after that. She was crying, which made it harder to stay calm, because I love her, and I don't like hearing her cry. She said she missed me. She said she hadn't wanted it to happen like that. She said she just didn't know what to do, that she and her husband were really struggling, that she felt like she had nowhere to turn. I said, "I understand you're struggling. That's real, and I'm sorry." She said, "So you'll help us?" I said, "Not that way." She went quiet. Then she said, "I didn't ask Mom to do it the way she did it." "But you knew," I said. She didn't say anything. "I'm not asking you to admit anything," I said. "I just need you to understand that it's not available. Not because I don't care about you. Because it's my home." She cried for a little while longer and I let her, and then she said she had to go. I said I loved her. She said she loved me too. We haven't talked much since then, and I'm not sure what that means for the longer term. I'm still figuring that out. My mother sent a card about a month later. A card like a holiday card, but blank on the inside except for her handwriting. She wrote that she hoped I was doing well. She wrote that she missed seeing me. She wrote that she wanted me to know the door was always open. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just a door being held open, as though all that had happened was that I had walked out of it for no reason. I put the card on my kitchen counter and looked at it for a few days. Then I filed it in the drawer where I keep important documents. I want to tell you what I actually did with the condo, because I think it matters. I didn't sell it. I didn't transfer it. I refinanced it into a trust structure like my attorney had suggested, which means the property is now held under an entity rather than my personal name. It's cleaner that way, legally. It also made me think more clearly about what I'm actually building. Not just a place to live, but a future I'm putting together piece by piece, without any input from people who never asked before deciding it belonged to them. I also started looking at investment properties, small ones, multi-family units in neighborhoods I know well from my work. The goal is to eventually have enough passive income, that my job becomes a choice rather than a necessity. That's not a new goal, but something about the dinner clarified it in a way that nothing else had. I had spent years being low-key about what I was doing, because I didn't want it to become a target. Now I understood that it would be a target no matter what, and the only real protection was to be far enough ahead that no one could reach it. That sounds cold, maybe. I don't mean it to be. I think about my family with something close to tenderness most of the time. I genuinely believe my mother thought she was solving a problem. I think my dad, in his quiet way, convinced himself this was fine, or at least not his problem to stop. I think my sister is caught between a husband who needs more than he earns, and a family that has always looked to me to make up the difference. None of that makes any of it acceptable. But I'm not angry. Not anymore. Anger takes energy, and I've been putting my energy somewhere else. My aunt, my dad's sister, invited me to her house for Thanksgiving this year, not my parents' house. Hers, separately. She said she wanted to make sure I knew I was still family to her, that what happened was not my fault, and that she and her husband would love to have me if I wanted to come. I said yes. I brought a pie because she mentioned she wasn't making one. She laughed when I came in with it. Her husband shook my hand and said it was good to see me. Their kids were running around and chaotic and completely uninterested in whatever had happened at my parents' house 6 months before. I sat at their table and ate turkey and watched football and helped with the dishes afterward. On the drive home, I thought about how the people you come from and the people who are actually your family are sometimes two very different groups, and that understanding, that distinction, is its own kind of inheritance. My mother's last message to me was sent on a Sunday morning. It said, "I hope you know what you've done to this family." I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and finished my coffee.